Hey there, my name is Alex and this is my review of Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 8, The Mountain and the Viper. There'll be spoilers, and considering what happened this episode, those are pretty big spoilers. So if you've not seen the episode and don't want to be spoiled, stop watching now. Well, where to begin? This was another of those shock episodes, much like when Ned got dead, and the Red Wedding and so forth. I get the impression they had the end of the episode done first, and then tried to think of ways to lead up to that moment. And they met with success in some scenes and failure in others. It continues the trend of Season 4 being very mixed. I think it's by and large better than Season 3, much better than Season 2, but still far from the heights of Season 1. So we'll start with the bad stuff, the stuff I didn't like. Can you guess what scenes I didn't like? Well, the Dany scene first and foremost. Strangely enough, it wasn't actually her acting this time that put me off, it was actually the way that the scene was written. We haven't really seen much emotion from Dany in a long time, even the knowledge that her closest advisor, her dear friend and her bear, Jorah Mormont, has been spying on her. Even that wasn't enough to make her rage and lash out. Why not? Instead we got what I assume is her trying her best not to look at him and to contain her anger. Sorry, but I don't buy that for a moment. If her character has become so infallible and perfect that she doesn't rage at something like that, she would realise what Jorah did and understand what Jorah did, and forgive what Jorah did, after giving him a stern talking to and a punishment. But she should have raged at him, screamed at him and sent him off in a fit before she thinks better of it. Her cold, quiet anger just doesn't work with that scene. She's clearly collected and relatively calm, and yet she still makes a rash and bad decision. It doesn't add up, and that's what happens when you change things from the book but keep the same ultimate effect. She's pretty damn mad at Jorah in the books, and that shows, and her sending him away is perhaps not the most thought out decision she's ever made, and she does have some slight regrets over it, even though she does feel it was the best thing to do. But here though, she's calm, she's collected, and yet she still just sends him off even though he's a valuable asset, and she doesn't consider what he could, that he could be an asset to her enemies. Kinda, this doesn't add up. Also in Meereen, we got more of the Grey Worm and Missandei plot. I'm not really sure why we're getting this. I mean, what purpose does it serve? Why are we developing these characters as opposed to Barristan Selmy? I'm not really bothered by it. I'm just trying to understand what I'm supposed to get out of it. The development of Barristan tells us more about Rhaegar and Aerys. It's crucial to Dany's character, her thirst for knowledge concerning her family, and realising the truth of her father. But what do we get out of Grey Worm and Missandei's scenes? What are we supposed to take away from that? Is it that Grey Worm, despite his brutal conditioning and despite being a eunuch, still has an interest in women? That love prevails even over such things? Questionable, in my opinion. Likewise, considering that Missandei was introduced as being a translator who told Dany all about the Unsullied and how they were made, it seems odd to me that she didn't know about the process of them getting cut, or rather she didn't know how much of them was cut. I'm pretty sure she did in the books, but well, maybe there's a good reason for that. Maybe they kept that secret because it was part of their special process to make the ultimate soldier. I don't know. Also, one tiny thing I have to point out. The bathing scene, all the ladies were naked but the Unsullied were wearing pants. I assume that was to spare us the sight of their scars, but it felt a little odd to me that they just jumped in wearing pants. Why not, I don't know, loincloths or something similar? That's not really an issue, it just stood out as a little weird to me that they were wearing pants whilst the girls were essentially butt naked. And I never thought I would be complaining that people aren't naked on Game of Thrones. Not enough nudity, clearly. Finally, the Tyrion and Jaime scene. I usually love scenes between those two, but this was horrible. It was one of the most pointless scenes in the entire series. It was like, what, 4, almost 5 minutes long, dedicated to a made-up character, and his obsession with smashing beetles. I can understand that maybe Tyrion was reliving a memory of being powerless, or focusing on something completely random, because he's so nervous about what's coming, but it adds nothing to the show, and it was so long and so poorly written. And if you ask someone to explain that scene and the meaning behind it, I mean, what do you think? I asked a few people after I saw it, and they said, what scene? Tyrion going and talking about bugs, and the message it was supposed to give was so vague. I mean, is it supposed to convey that he feels powerless, as he did then? Is he comparing his moron of a cousin to the Mountain? Or, I don't know, what a terrible scene. Just think of what we could have had instead. We could have had foreshadowing for an upcoming and very important dialogue between Jaime and Tyrion. We could have had the relatively important dialogue between him and Oberyn, which was kind of cut short. Or we could have improved on and expanded on other scenes in this episode, such as Jorah's send-off, which was rather rushed and short. Or perhaps better yet, they could have expanded on this next scene. The Theon scene. I both liked and disliked this scene. I liked it for the most part. I just thought it was too short, and that Theon didn't wear his persona as Theon well enough. They also cut one of my favourite parts of that scene, wherein the guard at the gate asks Theon who will watch the gate if he's going to be escorting Theon over to see the man in charge. And Theon points to a dead man and says, him. Also, whilst it's not exactly a problem, Moat Cailin in the show looks nothing like how I imagined it. Which is rare for the show, actually. Most castles, cities and keeps look more or less how I kind of envision them in my mind, but Moat Cailin doesn't. It seems to be a big castle in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I thought the point of Moat Cailin is that if you want to get to the north, you have to go through the neck, and Moat Cailin guards the neck, and you have to go through Moat Cailin, and it's pretty much impossible to take Moat Cailin from the south. Or was it from either side? I don't know, but basically, it's damn hard to take. I always pictured it as being in the middle of a swamp, I think it's described, being impassable from either side because it's surrounded by bogs and marshes and little men who shoot you with poisoned arrows, with only a narrow causeway leading to it. I mean, perhaps the show version is more accurate, I'm not really sure, but I don't know, I just don't really like how it looked. It was kind of just like Harrenhal 2.0, but the majority of that scene I enjoyed. I just wish they had lingered there a little longer. An extra minute, an extra 2 minutes would have been great, and you could have easily trimmed that from that rubbish Tyrion beetle scene, after all. The Sansa scenes, again, mixed bag. I can't believe how poorly they wrote Littlefinger this episode. They pretty much butchered his character. Well, at least for one scene. Here is a man who's a step or 5 ahead of everyone, who manipulates everyone. And what does he do? He murders one of the most powerful women in the land, and then doesn't even think up a good excuse beyond, well, she just jumped out of her own accord. Where was his scene with Lyn Corbray? Why did they leave him completely at the mercy of Sansa? Sansa, whatever. It was completely out of character and kind of bad. Other than that, and Sansa turning into Maleficent, basically turning into Angelina Jolie, I enjoyed the scenes. Okay, one tiny issue though. I liked Bronze Yon, but why wasn't he wearing his bronze armour? Disappointed. All of the Wall and Mole's Town stuff was fine, with the exception of Sam being so stupid. He knew the wildlings were coming from the south, and he still put Gilly directly in their path. See, Sam is meant to be relatively clever, if awkward, so that's also out of character. Let's protect Gilly from my brothers by putting her directly in the path of wildlings in a place where my brothers also happen to frequent often. Horrible writing, and it's only there to serve as some, to generate drama for no reason. More at home in an episode of EastEnders than Game of Thrones. Although I doubt even EastEnders would have such forced drama. It's about as subtle as, well, what happened to Oberyn's face. And how about that? The pre-fight dialogue made me groan. Today's not the day I die. Famous last words there, Oberyn. Such a mixed bag, again, that final scene. Let's start with the good, as no doubt people think I'm being too negative and whining and stuff. So, the good. Well, Oberyn's acting was great. I'm sad to see him go, as he's been one of the highlights of this season, even if he's underutilised and not given the range he should have been given. Other than that, I can't think of much praise. It's good that the fight went down. I mean, the fight went down. It was. Gosh, I don't even know how to explain. The concept of the fight was great, but the execution was pretty naff, to be honest. For starters, Tyrion mentioning Oberyn's lack of a helmet comes off as some sort of self-aware joke. But just because you joke about it doesn't make it any less stupid. Oberyn not wearing armor? Okay, fine, we can go with that. Not wearing his house colours? Fair enough, I suppose. No shield? Well, yeah, I can kind of understand that, as they went with some kind of crazy wushu fighting style. No excuse for the lack of a helm, though. And there's no excuse for Gregor. He's named the mountain that rides. He's supposed to be like 8 feet towering plate mail behemoth thing. There's no excuse for his stupid armor. At least he wore a helm. The actual fight was kind of poorly directed, unfortunately. That wasn't supposed to be an action scene, but it was shot like an action scene. It's a deeply personal confrontation, and the camera work was not indicative of that whatsoever. Oberyn's twirly, swirly flipping? I don't really care about that. I mean, sure, he can do wushu all he wants, I don't mind. It's all in the camera work. Quick cuts are a surefire way to remove any tension from a scene. The only close-up of Oberyn in that entire fight was when the mountain was sticking his fingers in his eyes. But hey, I have to give them credit for keeping the ending of that fight very similar to how it went down in the books. A shocking, brutal moment. Although I kind of get the feeling they just like that stuff because it gives them a chance to include ridiculously over-the-top gore. And I have to nitpick too. Oberyn is quick as a cat, flipping all over the place. But then when he gets surprised by Gregor and has his one foot swept out from under him, first instinct should have been to roll away, or at least, like, turn as he's landing. They should have had Gregor just grab him and pull him down. That was Oberyn's mistake. If a man that huge grabs you, it's almost impossible to escape. But he didn't grab him. He just kind of swept his foot out from under him. It's nitpicking, I know, but it kind of bugs me, as they put so much emphasis on showing how damn agile and flippy Oberyn is. So instead of just having him go whoa and fall over, Gregor should have grabbed him in a bear hug, so to speak. I know this all sounds very harsh, but I did kind of enjoy that last scene. And it left me feeling uneasy, because that was so damn brutal. I'm just approaching it critically, because that's how things get better. You have to focus on the bad things if you want them to ever improve. Considering the budget that Game of Thrones has, considering how much they hyped this episode up, they should have shot that duel in a way that didn't suck. Have you seen the film Rob Roy? That actually has a great duel at the end between a tall man with a large sword and a much smaller, faster opponent. It actually ends in a vaguely similar manner too, where the big guy is like down and the small guy gets cocky. Now the camera work and the choreography of that scene is what they should have taken as their inspiration, instead of, well, whatever did inspire them. The scene was not bad, but it could have been so much better. It could have been a moment that would go down in TV history, but instead it was okay. It was passable. Why settle for that? Game of Thrones is something quite special. It's loved in a dozen countries around the world. It has appeal to a huge audience. And instead of pushing for something amazing, they settle for okay, as if it was just something they had to get out of the way instead of focusing on and making it great. But what about next week? One of my favourite scenes in the entire series could well happen next week, and I really hope they pull out all the stops and give us an episode to top Blackwater. I'm really hoping they won't settle for average for next week.